There we go. Right, we are recording. So we're in session 4, as I said. We are going to cover off finding media contacts. We've been through writing a press release, we've been through getting our news hook and that kind of thing, and now we need to know where to send it. So that's what we're going to cover today. So if you haven't watched the first 3 of these series, of these sessions, it's probably a good idea to go back and watch them if you get a chance, because we're sort of working in logical order. So today we're going to talk about finding media contacts. We'll cover off a little bit about podcasts as well, specifically around media, but podcasts too, because that's a sort of increasing part of the media world, and it's really becoming a big part of what I do in my PR role for people. Involves podcasts now as well. So if we look at the media first, it helps if you can build up a network of contacts, and this is something that takes time, but once you have started to get that database of people you can reach out to, people you can send your press material to, then it makes life so much easier. So here's a few ways that you can do that and build up your network of media contacts. One, you could do actual networking. So if there's events where press or media are likely to be there, maybe they're run by a media organization, maybe they've got a sort of media theme to them, then if you get yourself along to those, there's a reasonable chance that you'll get to meet people at those kind of events that either work in the media or who have good contacts that work in the media. So sometimes good old-fashioned showing up and chatting to people is a great way of making contacts. So the next one is online searches, and this is probably the first place we would all start. Good old Google, you can't beat it. So yeah, a great way to find media contacts is to look online for the journalists that are covering the kind of story that you're pitching. So if you are, for example, writing a story or a press release about, say, an exhibition that you're holding in Glasgow, a great idea would be first to look for other stories about exhibitions that have been held in Glasgow, which publications covered them, which reporters wrote them, you know, who's covered that kind of thing in the past. And a simple way to do that is just to literally Google Glasgow art exhibitions and then click to the news tab on the Google search, and you'll just get all the latest news stories relating to that. So we look at which publications have covered them, we look at which journalists have actually written those stories, and then we know that that is part of their repertoire as a journalist. That's the kind of story that they can write and that they are involved in writing. So then we would want to reach out to those specific journalists. Sometimes their contact details are on the newspaper's website. Sometimes if they're freelance reporters, they actually sometimes have their own websites, or more often than not these days, they usually have social media pages. So you can try those different ways to get in touch once you know the journalist that you're looking at getting in touch with. You can always ring the publication if you're struggling to get details for who is best to actually send your press release to. You can always try and call the newspaper or the publication to get the email address of the reporter you want to contact. However, I would say that is a lot easier said than done these days, because in my experience, the media do not want to speak to us as much on the phone as they used to. So yeah, it's not an easy task to get somebody on the phone at a newspaper. The next point to note is always keep a note of your contacts. So this sounds really obvious, but make sure you keep a note of any journalist contacts that you do manage to get, because it's super annoying if you can't find their details again the next time you need them. It might be like a year later, or 9 months later, and you're like, oh, I can't remember their name, I can't find their email, I can't find where I noted it down in my diary. So just try, and each time you get a journalist contact details, even if it doesn't actually lead to a story, even if it doesn't lead anywhere, just make a little note of it, make a note of their details, who they work for, so that you can start building up a little database as soon as you get any of these contacts, even if it's just only a couple, or you're literally just adding somebody new every 6 months or whatever, a few people a year. Just makes life easier when the time comes when you need to look back and use these contacts potentially again in the future. Also, a great way these days is to ask in groups, forums, communities, just like the GGC, if people have got any connections to journalists, and you know yourselves, when you ask for support in this group, in the GGC group or the GGC business group, you know, as with anything else, people, you know, we ask for help, and there will almost always be someone who can offer assistance in some way, just like they do with lots of other requests for help and information and support. If you reach out and say, does anyone know anyone that works in the media and deals with this, or a journalist who works for this publication, you'll be surprised. There probably will be someone who can pop up and say, yes, I've dealt with them in the past, or my brother's friend works at that paper, blah, blah, blah. So it's always worth asking in groups for help and information, basically. Also, you can sign up to Facebook groups that connect people and businesses with media, with journalists, basically. So there's a few Facebook groups that are good for that. Pitch and Shout is one that I am a member of. And there's also one called Lightbulb that a lot of people use. I don't, because I'm a PR, so they don't let PRs in that group. But if you're a business owner, or, you know, you're just looking to promote yourself or your business, then that could be a great one to join, so that you can start pitching yourself, pitching your story, making contacts with journalists, looking at what shout outs they're putting out, because they'll put call outs for stories at times, and you can pitch your business and see if any of the journalists within the group are interested. And also, it's just a good way of getting a sense of what the media are looking for. And obviously people put in advice and guidance in these groups that can be really helpful as well. Then there's actually some paid for platforms as well. I use one called Editorial, which I don't get paid to tell you about them, but I use them a lot because I find that they cover a broad spectrum of media, a broad spectrum of topics. And basically, it's a platform where journalists do shout outs for, like on a daily basis, for contributors to feed into stories that they're looking for about specific themes. So it might be, I'm looking for someone to talk about retail, or to talk about this store closing down. It might be someone to talk about mental health on World Mental Health Day. You know, it could be anything like that. It could be looking for inspiring stories, looking for business success stories. It can be broad and it can be really specific. It just depends. There's a whole mix. So that's a really good one. So if you really want to, you know, go more serious on it, then you can do these kind of paid for platforms where you get access to journalists. And of course, the more that you pitch to them, the more you build up a relationship, and the more you build up that those contacts and that database of contacts moving forward as well. So that probably covers off the best place to get media contacts. Podcasts are another avenue as well, obviously, to promote our business in terms of PR. So, and one of the things I spend a lot of time these days pitching, doing for my clients, is pitching them to be guests on podcasts, trying to sort of encourage the podcast to have them on as a guest by telling them, you know, why they'll be a valuable guest, what they can talk about, etc. So it's just cover off this quickly. It's a similar approach to the media, but in particular, again, you can use online searches to find the kinds of podcasts that appeal to your market. So if you think, what kind of podcasts are your target audience likely to be listening to? Is it education? Is it business related, mental health related, parenting? So many different themes, and basically just write down the themes of podcast that you think your potential target market might be listening to. And then you can do online searches to find you know, probably screeds and screeds of podcasts that relate to those specific themes. Also, another good thing is to look at which podcasts other people in your field have appeared on. So if you're a PT, for example, and you might want to look at other podcasts that some of your competitors might have appeared on, or just take note if you see somebody saying, I'm appearing on this podcast this week, then you might want to reach out to that podcast too, because potentially it's something that, you know, if they're interested in them, they might be interested in you as well, because you're from a similar sort of background in terms of business related background. Again, you can also join Facebook groups where people do call outs for podcast guests, and where you can actually pitch yourself as a guest. I mean, the main thing is with all of this is groundwork. It's all groundwork, and it does take time. There's no denying that. It's not, you know, to build up a contacts list of media and podcasts is a long-term sort of mission. But the amazing thing is that anyone can do it. You don't have to be in PR. You don't have to run an agency. You can, through these sort of means and techniques that I'm teaching here, build up a decent contact list for media. And it's really, really valuable when you do it now. Obviously, most of the things that I've sort of talked about here are free in terms of financial cost. So the time is the cost, you know, putting the time in to do these things. But obviously, if you don't have the time, you can get someone in to help you. Someone who, like me, helps clients either with press, media, sort of hooks, lines, writing press releases for them, and also obviously targeting the media, because I've got my own contacts list sort of created now. Helps put you in touch with different contacts in the media, and also in podcasts, you know, people to pitch you and to again have that list of contacts that you can reach out to. So there's people out there that can help if you really want to do that and you feel like you don't have the time. I am one of those people. If you want, you know, to have a PR power hour with me, then we can do that, because after an hour we would literally have a list of the types of media and the podcast that you would want to be pitching to, what you would want to be pushing to them in terms of what you can offer, and you would literally be ready to just go off and get started to do it. So I'll put a link in the comments in case anyone wants to book in and have that power hour chat, and get everything in place to start reaching out to media. So yeah, that was a bit of a whirlwind, wasn't it? But anyway, that's all that I was going to talk about today. I hope it's been helpful. Next month, we are going to talk about dealing with a PR crisis. So that should be a fun one. They certainly had my fair share of those over the years. So yeah, until then, I hope you all have a great October, and I shall see you very, very soon.